Okay, thanks. Is there anybody here for the first time? Welcome. Welcome. What brought you? She did. Okay, very nice. Good for you. All right. Well, we're going to start with a bhajan, a hymn that describes Krishna and the gopis having loving exchanges. So if you know it, please sing along. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balabha Giribharatari Jaya Gopi Jana Balabha Giribharatari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balabha Giribharadari Jaya Gopi Jana Balabha Giribharadari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagatara Ashvatara Shata, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Jagat Guru Savior of the whole world, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol. So I'm just going to offer some prayers to spiritual teachers and offer my obeisances to the Vaishnavas. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyanan Gyanan Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Shribayam Rupakaramayam Dadati Svapavantikam Vanchakapatarubhishcha Kripasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavebhya Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna. So nice to see everybody, especially Bhishma Dev and Shamali Prabhu, who are family members who are visiting from out of town. We're so happy to see you. Okay, I have to start by telling you, I had a migraine all day, and I took some medication. And I may have taken just a touch too much because I feel like I'm floating a little bit. So please excuse me if I drift off a little bit. So, you know, it's the Christmas season, the New Year season in the western part of the world. This is our, you know, season of peace on earth, goodwill to men, right? And it's such a cliche that we all talk about those things during the season, and then we all wonder, like, where are those things to be found? Like, everyone in our society is at least giving lip service to the idea that we want peace on earth and goodwill to men. And then, I don't know about you all, but I get in my car at the Christmas season, and I swear, you know, like, everyone has become super intense and, you know, aggressive and stressed out, all trying to get where they're going and do what they need to do. And so I've been reflecting on, you know, what is it that's missing? You know, and at the most fundamental level, what's missing is God consciousness. We're all operating on our own independent, I want to say desire, but it's maybe not even desire just as much as it's the modes of material energy just acting on us and our senses dragging us one way or another. And so we're always in conflict. But on a more practical level, it's also because we don't know how to relate to one another. Like, we don't actually understand how to have positive, meaningful relationships because our society doesn't value those things. So I wanted to start, at least, by talking about a verse in Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction. And it's this, you know, little, I don't know, what are they, 8 verses? 11 verses, okay, I can't count. 11 verses, but it's small. You know, it's more like a pamphlet. And Rupa Goswami was one of the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an incarnation of Krishna who appeared a little over 500 years ago, and one of his purposes was to demonstrate to us how to practice God consciousness in this age of Kali Yuga, this age that we're in, which is the fourth age of quarrel and ignorance. This is when the mode of ignorance predominates. And, I read the headlines every day, and I'm never surprised to find that, my gosh, everybody's getting along and no one's in conflict. It never happens. If anything, it gets worse and worse and worse, and we're more disagreements and more wars and all of that. So one of the things Rupa Goswami talks about in this book, which is intended as kind of like a beginner's guide, this is how a young devotee, a new devotee can start out by reading these things. But one of the things he talks about is how people should interact together. And what he says is offering gifts in charity, receiving charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad, which is something that's been offered to the Lord, offering prasad, are the symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. All right. So these exchanges, they're called the 6 loving exchanges. These interactions are symptoms of love. All right. And we capture a lot of that at Christmas, don't we? Right? We give and receive gifts. I don't know about your family, but, it's all about eating, giving people all kinds of things to eat. But I think where we maybe don't always, at least I don't always, catch the mark is that revealing the mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially, right? Most of us in this day and age have a persona, right, that we present to the world. Maybe we have more than one persona, depending on, how many different groups we're hanging around with. If you're really expert, you can have one for your friends and one for your other friends and one for your boss and one for your wife, and, but who are we really? Even on a spiritual level, who we are is a servant of the Lord, right? But even on a material level, we don't always know, who am I really underneath all these layers. And so Rupa Goswami talks about how important it is that devotees associate with other devotees. All right? And let me put that in a broader context. Spiritual seekers, spiritual practitioners. If we want to make an advancement, if we want to, somehow progress on the spiritual side, we have to associate with others who also want to progress in that way. Now, why is this? Well, because Rupa Goswami says so, right? But also, if you just think about it, it makes sense, right? If you want to get ahead in life, people will always tell you, look for the people who have what you want and find out, make friends with them, get them to teach you, get them to show you. As human beings, as spirit souls, everyone's looking for love. Ultimately, Krishna is the source of all love. Krishna expands himself into the individual spirit souls and others to exchange love, right? So we're hardwired, we're created to exchange love, And what that means, on a practical kind of everyday level is we really want to be connected to other living beings, right? And that desire for connection can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? If we direct it towards the proper place, it's going to become something that's going to pull us forward spiritually. But if we don't direct it to the proper place, then it's going to become an impediment. And if you're a parent, or if you ever had a parent, you will know that one of the things that parents worry about is, who are my children associating with, right? Who are your friends? What does their father do? Where do they live? Because we want our children to have good influences, right? People who will lift them up. And, if we think that our children's friends are rascals or, may lead them into some trouble, what do? You can't associate with that person, right? Because association is going to affect us, right? Sometimes when we're young and naive, at least I was this way, I wanted to associate with people who were, quote unquote troublemakers, because I was going to save them, right? I was going to make them feel better about themselves and show them, how to live a better life. And, and naturally, what do you think happened, right? I picked up all their bad habits, right? So association is really important. And that's what Rupa Goswami says, that if we want to make spiritual progress, we have to associate with people who are making spiritual progress. Srila Prabhupada says that one's desires and ambitions develop according to the company one keeps. That's actually even a deeper statement, if you think about it. We may associate with people who will help us go in the direction that we want to go in. But even the direction we want to go in is affected by association. So if we can keep our goal in mind of making spiritual progress and associate with spiritual seekers, then we're giving ourselves a sort of, head start, I guess is what I want to say. Okay. Well, like most things that I read in the spiritual literatures, it seems very straightforward, it makes sense, and yet somehow, right, it doesn't always manifest itself in my life in that, quick 1-2, I read about it, now let me implement it kind of way that I would like. And why is that? If I could read my notes, I'll tell you. Okay. So one thing that I alluded to before is this failure on our part to let our false image down, right? If we want to associate, sometimes we think that means like just being in the same room, Srila Prabhupada used an example that, sometimes his disciples would want to just be around him, right? And so certain people would, run down to the front of the temple whenever he was coming so they could be like the first to greet him, or maybe, want to travel with him or want to sit next to him, And others would say, well, is it more important to be with you or, to be doing the service that, because somebody's Prabhupada, somebody has to be back making the prasadam, cleaning Prabhupada's room, whatever, like which is more important. And in one exchange, Srila Prabhupada pointed out that a mosquito, right, can be very, very close to you, right? A mosquito is closer than anybody else. But do you appreciate that? Is that a relationship? No. The mosquito's harassing you and bothering you. So similarly, we can be in the same room with people, we can be talking with people, we can be interacting with people, but it may not be a loving exchange, right? For one thing, sometimes we're hostile, right? That's not a loving exchange. But if I'm not being authentic and true with who I am, if I'm not revealing my mind in confidence, right? Having a kind of an intimate exchange, then it's not really association, all right? So we have to learn how and who to try to have these exchanges with. And I'll just give you a simple example. My husband and I went to visit Giriraj Swami over the Christmas holiday. And he's very kind. He's one of Srila Prabhupada's initial disciples and really was instrumental in building up the Krishna consciousness in Mumbai, in India. Spent his health doing this, So we were speaking with him, and I talk about this all the time. We're going through a lot of transition because my husband's health has been very poor. So like everything is changing, and all our plans are, disrupted. And we get sometimes a little discouraged and a little resentful, like, Krishna, we've done so much for you. How can you do this to us? And so we were just speaking with Giriraj Swami, and he wanted to know more about us. So we were telling him a little bit about our past, and both of us have a little bit of history that we're not real proud of, And so we shared this with him, and then my husband kind of jokingly said, do you still like us, Maharaj? And Giriraj Swami said, I like you even more, you know. And then he said something that I thought was really profound, that if we're not real with people, if we don't reveal ourselves, then we're never going to feel the love that we're seeking, right? Because if we're not authentic, when people give us love, they're giving it to somebody who doesn't exist. We don't feel it. We're not nourished by it. So it's important. It's important to be able to reveal the mind to someone, you know, to be confidential with people. And if we want to make spiritual advancement, we have to have that exchange with somebody who has some spiritual knowledge to share with us. And for me, that's really hard, because those are the people I most want to impress with how together I am and how spiritual I am, right? Raj, let me tell you about all the wonderful service I've been doing and all the reading I've been doing and the great rounds I've been chanting, and, you know, and I'm great, Maharaj, I'm just fine. And then you go home and, you know, all the stuff that you're carrying, you're still carrying. So if you want to get that help from the spiritual leader, you have to be honest. And if you want to be honest with others, we have to be honest with ourselves. I was talking with a little boy today about, I forget what rascal thing he was thinking of doing. He's 8 years old, so, you know, it wasn't anything too profound. And I was joking with him, and I said, you know, you have to do it when no one's looking, right? And he says, yeah, when no one's looking, not even Krishna, right? You know, well, Krishna knows all our secrets, right? You know, we can fool, like Abraham Lincoln said, some of the people some of the time. But Krishna already knows, you know. A lot of times I'm don't want to think about, you know, some of my bad qualities. Not that I have very many, but, you know, the few bad qualities I have. I don't want to think about them because I want to pretend that I don't have them. But the truth is, our bad qualities are usually obvious to the people who are close to us. And definitely Krishna is aware of them. So I guess all of that is kind of a long way of saying there's really no point in trying to pretend that we're somebody we're not. You know, a lot of times we feel, at least I feel, like people are going to reject me, you know, if they find out I'm not perfect, you know. And again, it's one of those things everybody already knows, right? You know, what am I, you know, why am I trying to pretend that people think I'm perfect? No one thinks that. And you guys like me anyway, right? You know, so that's part of what we need in order to cultivate this love that brings about the peace and the goodwill. Another thing that gets in our way is that we have too much of the wrong kind of association, right? And what I mean by that is association of people who just aren't interested in spiritual life, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's their choice, you know. Everybody has different times in their life, and some people, you know, it's just not a time when that's on the top of their list. But it influences us, right? When I was a young lawyer, I started out working at a big law firm. And, you know, it's a particular lifestyle. You know, and from their point of view, they're giving you, you know, a lot of remuneration, right? A big salary. And they expect certain things in return. And at one point I was in a review meeting with my bosses, and they said, you know, there's one problem we have with you, which is that, you know, it seems like your family is more important to you than your job, right? And I was like, yeah, kind of, you know. I think so. You know, and that moment was really pivotal for me because I realized I could lean the other way. I could put my job as more important than my family. It's a totally legitimate choice that would be, you know, applauded by all the people in this room, you know. And if I stay here, that's what I'm going to end up doing, right? Because the pressure is going to be there, right? So I had to remove myself from this situation. And I had to think about whose influence do I want to be the most important in my life? You know, up until that point, certain of my mentors at work would have been pretty high on the list, you know. And after that point, it was kind of like, well, you know, let me rethink this, you know. And the way our society is set up, at least, you know, in this culture, we're defined by our work, right? We're defined by how we make money. It's probably the thing people most identify with. And when you meet somebody, what's one of the first things they ask you, right? What do you do? What do you do? Right? So we naturally are in situations where most of the people that we're influenced by and that we're, getting feedback from are the people we work with, right? Who do you spend most of your waking hours with? Unless you're fortunate enough to work from home, it's probably not your family, it's probably your coworkers. When my mother left her body, I came to the realization that, some of her coworkers knew more about her day-to-day life than I did because she spent more time with them. So my point is, if we don't make an effort to have the association of spiritual seekers, unless you're fortunate enough to work with spiritual seekers, if we don't make that effort, it's not going to happen, okay? Because our days are already full and our lives are already full with other kinds of association. So we have to make some conscious choices, And how do we do that? Okay. Well, one thing is simply to prioritize those relationships, right? Okay. So a lot of times we'll think, I don't have time to come to the temple. I think that a lot. Sunday night, I got so many things to do. Monday's starting, right? I don't have time to go to the temple, right? But we have to prioritize, whether it's at the temple or in some other way, we have to prioritize that time we spend with other spiritual seekers and the exchanges that we have with them. One of the things we can think about is, it's said in the Bhagavatam that one who worships the deity but doesn't know how to relate to devotees or even just people in general is a neophyte. Right? We can worship Krishna, right? But we best approach Krishna through other devotees. So if we don't have those relationships with other devotees, if we aren't prioritizing the relationships with other servants of the Lord, then we can only get so close to Krishna. We can only make so much advancement. Krishna even says, one who claims that he is my devotee is not my devotee. But one who claims to be the devotee of my devotee, the servant of my servant of my servant, that's my devotee. So you can't separate having a spiritual path and wanting a relationship with God and being part of a spiritual community. You're only going to get so far doing it that way. All right. And the other big thing that, at least in my life, has interfered with the benefits of devotee association is my tendency to fault finding, okay? And it's not just me, I'm not alone in this. It's the nature of the material mind to criticize, right? So why is this such an important thing? Well, when we're dealing with spiritual practitioners, there's special circumstances, right? On a completely material plane, relationships work in a certain way. But on a spiritual plane, there's an added factor, which is that by getting the association of other spiritual practitioners, our own spiritual life is nourished. All right? So the more we associate with other spiritual practitioners, the more advancement we're going to make. But if we offend, if we hurt, if we diminish, if we criticize other spiritual practitioners, then we actually impede our own spiritual development. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called offending devotees, offending spiritual practitioners, the mad elephant offense. All right? Because it said that our devotional life is like a little plant. The spiritual master plants the seed of this plant, the bhakti lata, in our heart. And we can nourish that seed so that it will grow with different spiritual practices and, serving the devotees is a very important one. But if we are offensive to others, then it's like a mad elephant comes into our garden, the garden of our heart, and rips up the spiritual creeper. So it's very important to learn how to associate with others, but without creating offenses. And that's like anything in spiritual life, it's all about balance. It's all about, intention, and it's very difficult. And so what I wanted to do was talk about a couple of examples of how devotees have reacted to offenses, perceived offenses, and different kinds of conflict. All right. And the example that always comes first to my mind is the pastime of Daksha and Shiva. So, how many of you know who Daksha is? Okay. So, in the Bhagavatam, it's described how Krishna, Lord Vishnu, Krishna, is the original source of everything, and the material universe comes from him. All right. Lord Brahma is the first living entity in the universe. He emerges, from Krishna's material universe, and he's the one who receives the first knowledge and passes it on. Daksha is one of Lord Brahma's sons, and his job was to create offspring to inhabit the universe. All right? So he's, you got Krishna, you got Lord Brahma, you got Daksha. So, he's a pretty elevated soul, got a pretty important job, right? And a lot of good qualities. Daksha also means expert, So he was, well-born, intelligent, capable, all of these qualities. And he's respected by the demigods because of this. So Daksha had daughters, and one of his daughters married Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva, he's an interesting personality, right? He's completely spiritually realized, liberated, servant of Lord Vishnu. He comes to the material world in order to handle things that Lord Vishnu might not want to handle directly. Lord Vishnu doesn't directly interact with the material energy, but Lord Shiva does. And, he's, like I said, he's an eccentric, right? He lives in he goes to the crematorium and smears ashes all over himself. He associates with, low-class ghosts and other things, right? So from a social point of view, I guess is what I'm saying, Lord Shiva is not necessarily the most comfortable person to have at a social gathering, put it that way, all right? But he's, also a very elevated soul, and whenever the Vedic sacrifices are performed, Lord Shiva is invited and, offered a share of the sacrifice. So Daksha, being very expert, very knowledgeable, he did many sacrifices, right? He performed many sacrifices for various purposes. And at one sacrifice, he arrived at the sacrificial arena. People were already there. They see him, Daksha, the progenitor, they all get up and offer him respects, except Lord Shiva. All right. And Lord Shiva is not only not Daksha, right, but he's married to Daksha's daughter, right? Daksha didn't even want him to marry his daughter, right? But Lord Brahma said, no, give your daughter to Lord Shiva, even though, he hangs around the crematorium. He'll make a good husband. So Daksha has given his daughter Sati to Shiva. And to top it all off, here's Shiva totally ignoring him when Daksha walks into the assembly. And Daksha is convinced that, Lord Shiva should have offered him respect, and his failure to do so is a deliberate insult. So what does he do? What does a father-in-law do when the son-in-law is not behaving properly, right? He chastises him. He scolds him, right? He criticizes him very heavily, right? You're a bum, you're a loser, I never wanted my daughter to marry you in the first place, and now you can't even behave like a gentleman, right? And, Lord Shiva's kind of above all of this, so he's not taking offense, but unfortunately, Lord Shiva's followers are all there. So they're taking offense, right? And so there's criticism, there's counter-criticism. Bhrigu Muni gets involved and, curses the followers of Shiva back. So everybody's upset, right? And so we see, this is what happens when you start fault finding. It doesn't affect just you, right? The whole community now is in conflict. The sacrifice doesn't even get taken care of because everybody's mad at everybody else. So this is this is the kind of family relationship we often see in this age of Kali Yuga, right? We all got the Christmas, Thanksgiving, right? We all get together, right? It's supposed to be happy. Everybody's supposed to be joyful. Great event going on. The next thing you know, two people are fighting. The whole family takes sides. Everybody walks away mad, right? So even in the Vedas, you know, this is human nature. This is the nature of souls in the material world. So everybody goes home mad, and yeah, not pleasant, but it goes on, you know, because Daksha doesn't get over this, right? He's still mad, and he has another sacrifice, and he's invited everyone, all the demigods, all their wives, everyone's invited, but he didn't invite Lord Shiva, and he didn't invite his daughter Sati. So Sati hears that everyone's going, and she wants to go, right? It's her home. They're having it at her parents, her sisters, everyone's going to be there, everyone she knows. And so she tells Lord Shiva, if you want to go, I would like to go with you, right? Nice wife, hint, hint, hint. Let's go, we're going, right? And Lord Shiva, you know, he's very clear-eyed, and he says, look, you know, your dad is still mad, you know, still offended. If we go, it's just going to be trouble, right? He's just going to continue to make offenses. But he, you know, interestingly, he tells her all of these things, and then he says, if you decide to go, this is what's going to happen. Leaves the decision totally up to her, which I always find challenging when I'm giving someone advice, right? This is the way it's going to be. This is what you're going to do, right? But no, he says, look, you can do what you want, but this is what you're likely to experience. And she goes, and that's exactly what happens. Lord Shiva totally predicted it. Her mother and her sisters are glad to see her, but her father, you know, he just starts criticizing her husband immediately, right? And Sati, you know, she tries defending her husband, and finally she just becomes so upset at the offenses that she's hearing, this criticism. She's like, I'm so ashamed to be your daughter. In fact, you know, this body came from you, and for that reason, I don't even want it. So she leaves her body. You know, great mystic personalities can do that. They can leave their body at will. And she does. And again, the community's in an uproar. You know, some people are siding with Daksha, but many people are thinking, what kind of father is so harsh to his daughter that when she says, you know, that's it, I'm leaving this body, he's like, fine. Go ahead, you know. But that's what can happen, right? When we're looking at relationships from a material point of view, and we're looking at it from the standpoint of, am I getting what I'm owed out of this relationship, right? Our hearts can become very hard. So that's what happened with Daksha, and naturally, once Sati left her body, all of Lord Shiva's followers are again upset, you know. So they're attacking Daksha and friends. Bhrigu Muni is chanting mantras to create an army of Brahmins, and so, you know, everybody's fighting. Again, the community is totally at war. And then Lord Shiva comes. And being Lord Shiva, he, you know, he can settle this very easily. And I love this description of how he takes a hair from his head and throws it to the ground, and it manifests into the demon Virabhadra. Virabhadra? Yeah, thank you. Who is, like they say, as tall as the sky, and he has thousands of arms, and each arm is holding a weapon. And it's said that he is the personification of Shiva's anger at seeing a devotee offended. All right? Because Daksha was so cruel and rude to his daughter, Lord Shiva's anger becomes personified in this demon. And, you know, again, it shows us how important it is not to be offensive to other spiritual seekers. So this demon, you know, pretty much defeats all the the Brahmin soldiers, the mantra soldiers that were created by Brigamuni. Destroys various things. Cuts off, this is the important part, he cuts off Daksha's head and throws it in the sacrificial fire so that it burns up. And Lord Brahma's comment on all of this is, if you're trying to perform a sacrifice and you're offending devotees, no good will come of it. Again, that heavy lesson about no matter what spiritual practice you're doing, the benefit can be destroyed by being offensive to others. Right? So even more important than the fact that you pay for this big sacrifice, you channel these mantras, whatever your spiritual practice is, if we're not respectful and kind to others, we just destroy the benefit of whatever we're doing. Lord Shiva, on the other hand, is very forgiving. And it's said that forgiveness is one of the beautiful qualities of spiritual practitioners. Forgiveness is something that we should actually cultivate. So he forgives Daksha. Daksha, finally comes to his senses, or not Daksha, Daksha's followers come to his senses and apologize. And Shiva restores to life the ones who've lost their lives, fixes their teeth, their broken legs, whatever. But the head of Daksha has been burned up, so he can't give him back his head. He ends up giving him the head of a goat. All right? And Daksha, at this point, by Lord Shiva's association, his heart has become softened. His heart has become pure. He's seeing things correctly now. And so while he was offended that Lord Shiva didn't stand up and greet him, right? Now that he's had his head cut off and he's wearing the head of a goat, he's actually grateful. Okay? And he says to Lord Shiva, I was totally in the wrong. I needed to be corrected. Thank you for correcting me. And hopefully now I can be a better person, a better spiritual progenitor. So take the takeaways, okay, what does all this mean? And that was like a very condensed version of a very detailed pastime. But the first thing is, what am I actually owed? Right? When I interact with others, I have expectations. But what actually does anybody owe me? Daksha was convinced that he was owed a certain kind of social respect. And he ignored the fact that although Shiva was his son-in-law, Shiva was actually superior to him on a spiritual level. And furthermore, he ignored the fact that Shiva's failure to greet him was a function of the fact that Shiva was engaged in meditating on the Lord and not an intentional insult as he had assumed. All right? So my first question to myself when I'm offended by somebody else is, what did they owe me? Right? And usually I realize that my expectation was laughable. Right? People don't owe me anything. Right? So if I understand that, I'm much less likely to take offense. All right? The second question is, who's actually causing this situation? Right? And there's kind of a material or practical level to this as well as a philosophical level to this. All right? On a philosophical level, what is the cause of anything I'm experiencing? It's my karma, right? The Lord has made an arrangement for the world to function in a particular way, the material world to function in a particular way. If we're connected to the spiritual energy, then the Lord is making arrangements for things to be happening to us in order to teach us how to advance spiritually. All right? So in that sense, it's actually whatever I'm experiencing is a blessing. Sometimes I feel like, okay, Lord, no more blessings right now. I can't handle it. But it is. Everything I'm experiencing is a blessing, a direct blessing. Even when we're not connected to that spiritual energy, everything we're experiencing is a function of our karma, right? And that whole system of karma is designed to kick us in the pants until we start saying, wait a minute, why am I suffering? What is this world all about? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Who am I? All right? So that's also a blessing. So in other words, there's no point in taking offense at anything anybody else is doing to us. Because if we understand it properly, it's actually a blessing. So we have to look for the blessing. What am I supposed to be learning here, right? And maybe what I'm learning is this person is not a good person for me to hang around with. That may be what I'm learning, all right? But again, there's no point in being upset with that person. And this is an experience that I've had many times because I do have that nature of wanting to be the center and wanting to be, the one who rescues everyone. Where I will go out of my way to try to help somebody, right, whose life is in some kind of turmoil. Usually what I discover is people have some subconscious reason why they like that turmoil is working for them. It feels comfortable, whatever. It's like they have their baggage and this turmoil is the way they function in life. And I come in and I'm like all about fixing their turmoil, so I don't have to look at my own turmoil, right? I'll look at your turmoil and fix that. And they don't appreciate it. I don't know, people just don't appreciate being bossed around by me. I don't get it. But then I get offended, right? I'm doing all this for you, and especially my kids, I'm doing all this for you, you don't even appreciate it, come on. Why should they be grateful? I just butted my big nose into their business and started telling them, how to live their life, and they're not grateful, right? So when I take that time and I step back and I say, okay, what's really going on here? What am I owed? Who's causing my suffering in this situation? I generally find that I don't need, I'm just not offended anymore because I start to realize, okay, I did this to myself. It's nobody owes me anything. And that helps. That helps a lot. The other personality that comes to mind when I think about associating with devotees, and especially this thing about taking offense and how we respond when others don't treat us the way we think we ought to be treated, is Draupadi. All right. So at the end, I don't know if you want to call it the end of the Mahabharata, but at the end of the Battle of Kurukshetra, all right, which is a big fratricidal war between Yudhishthira and his brothers and the Kauravas. At the end of this battle, if you haven't read the Mahabharata or you don't know about it, it's kind of hard to explain because there's just so many personalities involved, and they all have relationships with each other. The son of Arjuna's teacher, who's also a warrior, they're all warriors, Ashvatam, kills the children of Arjuna and Draupadi, which is, and they're children, they're not, grown-up people who happen to be your children. They're like small people, little children. And he kills them while they're sleeping, right, after the war is over. Like, who does this, right? By any kind of code of conduct, this is abominable activity. So Arjuna, captures him, and then there's this discussion about what should be done with him. Because on the one hand, what he's done is worthy of being executed. He's earned execution, and Krishna himself even says, yes, you have to kill him. But Yudhishthira, who's making this decision, he looks at things from many different angles, and he asks Draupadi, they're your children, what should we do? And Draupadi's answer always captures my heart, because what she says is, first of all, we owe this debt of gratitude to his father. All right. The father's now dead. So if you kill the son, then, the line ends. It's like killing the father all over again. So his father taught you, Arjuna, everything you know about fighting, made you the man you are today. So how can we do this? How can we be so ungrateful? And then even, I don't know if sweet is the right word, but that's what it seems like to me. Even more sweetly, she says, and I don't want his mother to suffer the pain that I'm feeling. I've lost my children, and and she's devastated. She's not like transcendental, like, oh, okay, well, I'm a liberated soul, my children are dead, oh, well, no. I mean, she's like any mother. She's completely destroyed by the death of her children. But she says, I don't want anyone, I don't want his mother to suffer this same pain. And that's such a platform that always impresses me, because when I'm hurt, my first thought is somebody needs to suffer with me, right? If my husband hurts my feelings, it's like, boy, have I got one for you, buddy, So this idea, this understanding that my pain is not more important than somebody else's pain, that not causing pain to others, that obligation doesn't disappear just because somebody's done something wrong. And this is where I've always had the biggest problem, all right? This righteous indignation. People do things that are terrible. Devotees do things that are mean, unkind, thoughtless, selfish. Devotees act badly sometimes. And for a long time, as a devotee, I felt like, okay, well, you did something terrible, so I'm justified in being offensive to you. It's like, I'm supposed to be humble, I'm supposed to be respectful, I'm not supposed to offend devotees, but, right, you just cross that line. Or there's always an exception. And what I get from reading about Draupadi in this situation is, yeah, actually, there's no line. This obligation on us to be forgiving, to understand where other people are coming from, actually, it doesn't end at any particular part. Now, there may be times when we just can't go there because we're not that advanced. And it doesn't mean that the person doesn't need to be corrected, doesn't need to be punished, doesn't need to be avoided, whatever. But it isn't up to me to make them feel bad for whatever they've done. It isn't up to me to punish them, to make things equal. And I see this in my work, and somehow I can't see it in my own life, but I see this in my work because I'm a divorce lawyer, right? And so people come in to the process of divorce, and they're all about, I've got this 20-year list of everything the other person did wrong, and I'm going to get payback for every single one of those things. Right? I mean, that's how we tend to react when we've been harmed. And I can, see from a practical standpoint in a divorce, getting payback for every single one of those things is going to cost you $100,000. Maybe you want to rethink your strategy here, right? And I feel like sometimes Krishna is saying that to me, like getting this payback that you think is so important is going to cost you your spiritual life. Do you want to rethink your strategy here? So I really take to heart this example of Draupadi to think not just about herself, but to think about others and to be willing to tolerate her own pain, in order to avoid giving pain to others. And, we see that example so many times in the lives of spiritual teachers. At this season, you can't help but think of Jesus Christ, right? He's on the cross being tortured by the Romans, and he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing, right? So this is actually a quality that not only reflects the spiritual advancement of the personality showing it, but it's also something that we can practice that will help us advance spiritually. So in conclusion, we can't make spiritual advancement by ourselves. We require a community. And being in a community means people are going to hurt our feelings, people are going to offend us, people are going to do something wrong, we're going to hurt people's feelings, we're going to offend, etc. So we have to be willing to step back from that process and not react to it. To act out of love and not out of pain. Thank you very much for listening. And maybe there are questions or comments or corrections. Rajendranandan Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. So blessed, yeah. I will. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah.
A point that shows how sometimes it's not a bad thing to forgive somebody. In the example of that is that in the next Kali Yuga, Dasi becomes so repentant and is performing austerity penances in the purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada says, Scripture says he's going to become the next Vyasa. So it's not like someone is eternally defined by some heinous act that they
Right.
perform. That was a great.
Very good point.
The first one that came to mind when you were giving the class, it's okay to use the proper use of the language. Your spiritual benefits can be destroyed by offenses. It might be worth considering that Krishna also says that all spiritual activities and benefits are eternal in nature and can never be lost or destroyed. So a little purport could be that they can become so postponed where they're almost as if lost because you become so much separated from the consciousness, the benefits, the blessings of spiritual activities. Because you have to go through the lesson and the experience of the reaction of the offense you committed. So that might be a footnote to just saying spiritual benefits are destroyed by offenses.
Thank you. That's a very good point. Yeah, yeah. We don't lose our spiritual benefit, but we can be greatly disconnected from them. All right. Chitura Prabhu.
It was really enlivening, and I love the psychology of it. I like the idea of forgiveness. I remember the grandmother I was talking about forgiveness some years ago at the lounge, and got us all thinking more deeply about it. And I was realizing that I don't really forgive people like I think I do. Because if you see someone and you're not happy, you haven't really forgiven them. You always need to be happy when you see them. But anyway, the idea was I was realizing it's a gradual process. And so forgiveness, I know this is more or less forgiveness can be gradual, and we can make advancement in that way, and not beat ourselves up or not have the illusion that we have, forgiven them. And then gradually we can have that feeling, like when we see that person, we can actually be happy, and maybe from a distance or whatever, but be happy that we're free of it, and that they're somehow Krishna's in their heart, and have respect.
Thank you. Very true. Anyone else?
Will you let me say one more
I'll
thing?
let you say anything.
We owe you a great debt for the lessons you just repeated and shared with us. When you say no one owes me anything, I think scripturally I can defeat you very easily on that one. Parents, let's talk about a mother. Lord Chaitanya said he could not repay the debt he owed his mother. That's always a thought that comes to mind on Mother's Day. Any teacher, any parent, any political leader, or ruler, we should say, that actually cares for and guides, protects their subjects is owed a debt. The cow or animals that, the earth, we are full of debts. And certainly, if we have benefited anybody, whether they neglect that reality and don't, in fact, do the opposite, abuse or neglect us, even though they owe us. The main point you were saying, we should take the high road. They may have a problem, but are less involved in the reciprocation. Is I have to tolerate, any blessings I've shared or passed on. It's only by the grace of my teachers in the Lord, and aspire for the forgiveness of yours.
Yeah, I guess what I mean is we need to focus on, if we focus on what do I owe others rather than what do others owe me, we're going to be happier. Thank you. All right. All glories to Prabhupada.